All right, so today we're going to work on linear inequalities and interval notation. So the first thing that we're going to look at is making sure you guys understand and know those symbols. We have less than, greater than, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. We have been working with equation, and what makes an equation is that it has an equal sign. Now we will start working with inequalities, and it will have an inequality symbol instead. A linear inequality in a one variable can be written in the form of ax plus b is less than c, or less than or equal to c, greater than c, greater than or equal to c, where a, b, and c are real numbers and a cannot equal 0. The solution, or the answer to a linear inequality, is a set of numbers that can be represented in one of these 4 ways. So we can write it as an inequality, we can use a number line, interval notation, or on a graph. We're going to focus on the first 3. So let's start off by knowing when to use which symbol. So if an inequality is less than or greater than, then the number line will have an open circle. And therefore the interval notation will use parentheses. That means it's not equal to, and it gets really close, but we cannot use that value. Now let's see how it looks when it's less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. That number line will be solid, so that dot will be filled in, and the interval notation will have brackets. Okay, so these are parentheses and brackets. Parentheses, you cannot include that value. Bracket, you can. Moving on, talking about positive and negative infinity. We use the infinity symbol to represent or show the solution is unlimited, endless, without bound. As I like to say, it keeps going on forever, both negative and positive values or numbers. Okay, and anytime we use the infinity symbol, it's always gonna have parentheses. So let's look at these examples. So the very first thing I'm going to highlight is the inequality. X is less than or equal to 3. The next thing I'm going to highlight is the number line, how it would look on a number line. And basically we want all the values that are less than or equal to 3. So you always start on your left bound. How far left did it go to infinity? And that's why we write negative infinity, because we're using a negative infinity. Then we use the parentheses. How far right did it go? To 3. And because that circle is close, then we can use the bracket. Moving on to the next example, that is less than, x is less than 3. That means all the values have to be less than 3. So if you look at your graph, that's why it's negative infinity to 3. It stops at 3 and it has an open circle because it's not equal to. And then here's the interval notation, negative infinity to 3. And they both have parentheses. Infinity symbols always have parentheses. And that 3 you cannot include. It's less than parentheses. Move on to the next example. So x has to be greater than or equal to 3, and that's why our number line shows this. It's from 3 to positive infinity. That 3 is close, that's why we use the bracket, and then to show positive infinity we use parentheses. Let's move on to the very last example. Let me get to an orange. X is greater than 3. Okay, that's the inequality. Now we're going to go to the number line, which is 3 to positive infinity. That circle, is open. And so that is why when we go to interval notation, it's 3 with parentheses to positive infinity with parentheses. Keep in mind we always read left to right. Okay, so just to recap, the first thing, this is the inequality. This is the number line. And this is the interval notation. And you're gonna have to excuse all the noise. I'm at swim practice. A band is practicing behind me at the high school. And you hear some cars. I'm outside with the kids. Next, we're going to use a number line to represent the solution set of inequalities. So let's say they give you a number line. How do you write that in interval notation? So let's go on to the very first one. You see how far left does it go? It goes to -2. It's close, that's why we use the bracket. To positive infinity, and that's why we use parentheses. Moving on to the next example, how far left does it go? To negative infinity. How far right does it go? To 2. It's open, so you use parentheses. Open parentheses, closed brackets. And now we're going to go to the third example, which is -3 to -1. Because that 3 is open, that means parentheses. If it was closed, then we'd use a bracket. To -1, that one is closed, and we use a bracket. When it's shaded, we can include. When it's not shaded, we cannot include. All right, so let's practice and let's see how and when we would use this. So here are 3 inequalities. We're going to solve them, and then we're going to draw the number line, and then we're going to write the solution as interval notation. So just like equations, we solve them. So this would be a +8 + 8. Bring down the 3x less than or equal to 21. Divide by 3, divide by 3. X is less than or equal to 7. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a number line. Here's a number line. I'm going to identify 0, identify 7. Okay. It's less than or equal to, so that means it's closed. And because we want all values that are less, we're going to go to the left. So when I write my interval notation, then that's going to be negative infinity to 7. And because I can include it and it's closed, then it's going to be a bracket. Moving on to the second example, 5w is less than 20. I'm going to divide by 5, divide by 5. W is less than 4. Here's my number line. I'm going to start with 0, identify my 4. Now, that's less than, so it has to be an open circle, and I want values less than 4, so then that goes to left, negative infinity. So when I read and I write, I start from the very far left. How far left does it go? Negative infinity. How far right? To 4. And it's open, I cannot include, so parentheses. And now moving on to the last example, which is -5z is less than or equal to 20. So here's my little fence. Now here you have to note, and we all know we're going to divide by -5. But anytime you have an inequality and you multiply or divide by a negative value, number, you have to flip or change the sign. So that would be z is greater than or equal to -4. Here's my number line. Here's a 0. Here's a -4. Now it's equal to, so that could be closed. And that has to be greater than, so to the right. Now when I write the interval notation, it's going to be -4. It's closed. And how far right does it go? Positive infinity. And infinity symbols always use parentheses. So I'm going to just divide this so that way you can see which one belongs with which one. Make this smaller. Okay. So I hope this helps.